The ceremony moved forward with smooth steps. The guests were now seated again, and the air inside the church carried a sense of celebration. The officiant's voice rose gently, speaking words about love, trust, and new beginnings. Mark stood straight. Beside Claire, his expression calm and certain. His friends and relatives watched with warm smiles, believing they were witnessing a perfect match. But Liam's mind was not calm. He kept his eyes fixed on Claire, watching her every move. Her smile never faded, but her hands adjusted the bouquet twice, in a way that seemed more like checking than fidgeting. The way she shifted her weight from one foot to another was not the nervous sway of a bride. It was deliberate, balanced, as if she were ready to move quickly if needed. Over the past few weeks, Liam had tried to bring up his concerns to his father in small ways. He had mentioned that Claire's background seemed vague, that she never talked much about where she grew up or her school days. He had pointed out that she changed phones often, or that she sometimes stayed awake deep into the night, walking slowly through the living room as though she were listening for something. But each time Mark had responded with a light laugh, saying that some people just value privacy, or that she was probably just a night thinker. Liam wanted to believe that maybe he was wrong. Maybe he was only imagining things. But then there were the times she called him by his full name, when even his teachers at school used only his first name. It felt formal, in a way that did not match the warm tone she tried to keep. There was also the strange incident 2 weeks ago when Liam had been walking home from the library and saw Claire across the street, speaking to a man he did not recognize. She had been leaning closer to him, as if sharing something important. The moment she noticed Liam, she smiled, waved, and the man walked away without another word. The small sensor in Liam's pocket had been his quiet proof. It had been built for a science project to measure unusual frequencies in the air and display them on a tiny screen. The readings were always normal around most devices in their house, but whenever he passed near Claire's purse or certain pockets of her coats, the screen would light up with a moving pattern, unlike any regular signal he had ever recorded. He had tested it again just last night, and the results were even stronger. The ceremony continued with the officiant, inviting the couple to share their vows. Claire spoke first. Her words were steady and smooth. She spoke of kindness, of partnership, and of standing beside Mark in every challenge ahead. Her voice was calm, yet carried a rhythm that almost sounded, practiced like lines memorized before a performance. When Mark began his vows, his voice was warm and filled with genuine feeling. Liam's heart tightened, not from joy but from the heavy thought that his father's trust might be misplaced. Liam's gaze drifted toward the windows lining the church wall. The sunlight through the colored glass painted gentle patterns on the floor. But he noticed Claire's eyes move toward those same windows more than once. It was quick each time, but enough for him to see. He wondered if she was simply admiring the light, or if she was checking the outside world, the street, the sky. The guests were unaware of his growing unease. They whispered quietly between moments of the ceremony. Some passed tissues to each other, expecting happy tears to follow. The flower girl sat swinging her legs gently, looking bored in the way only small children could during long events. No one here saw what Liam saw or felt, the same cold thread of suspicion weaving through his thoughts. He remembered the first time he had tried to tell his father something serious about Claire. It was during dinner. Mark had been reading messages on his phone while Claire cleared the table. Liam had said plainly, "Dad, I think something is strange about her." Mark had looked up surprised but not alarmed and asked why Liam had listed a few small things, then stopped when he saw the look in his father's eyes. It was the kind of look that said he was already too deep in his feelings. For Claire to believe otherwise, Liam had stayed quiet after that, waiting and watching. Now the moment he feared was coming faster than he had expected. The officiant asked if anyone in the room had reason to object to the marriage. A few guests chuckled, softly as if the idea were only a formal tradition to be quickly passed over. Liam's heart began to pound in his ears. His hand tightened around the sensor in his pocket. The little device felt heavier than it had that morning. He looked at his father, then at Claire. Her eyes were locked on Mark's face, but there was something about her smile now. It was still warm, but slightly sharper, as if she already knew nothing would stop the day. Liam's pulse quickened. He thought about the files he had seen on her phone the night she left it unattended on the kitchen counter. He had not been snooping for messages, but he had noticed a folder buried under layers of other folders. Inside were images of buildings and equipment that looked exactly like parts of his father's workplace. The space research facility was secure and private, and yet here were photos taken from unusual angles as if studied for design, not for memory. The officiant's pause stretched for a moment, waiting. For any voice to speak, Liam could almost feel the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Should he remain silent and watch the rest of the day play out, or should he risk being wrong and interrupt everything in front of family, friends, and strangers? His mind raced through the past year, through every glance, every late night, every unexplained absence Claire had made. His breath grew shallow as he thought about what would happen if he said nothing, and his worries turned out to be true. Claire adjusted her bouquet again, and her eyes flicked toward the door for only a second. That was enough for Liam to feel his chest tighten. This was not a nervous bride's habit. This was someone keeping track of more than just the moment before her. Liam's decision began to form in his mind. It would not be easy. It would not be comfortable. But if the truth needed to be spoken, then it had to be now before it was too late. The day before the wedding had started like any other. But for Liam, it had carried a weight he could not explain. He woke up early, feeling restless. The house was quiet with his father already at work, and Claire moving around in the kitchen, making tea. She greeted him with the same calm smile she always wore. Yet something about her voice felt more deliberate than usual, like she was choosing each word carefully. Liam spent most of the morning working on his science project in his room, the small device he had built from wire circuits, and a basic display screen sat on his desk. It was designed to detect and measure unusual frequencies in the air for a school assignment. The project had earned interest from his teacher, who thought it could be shown at the science fair. But for Liam, it had taken on a second purpose, ever since he noticed strange readings near Claire. Around midday, Liam went downstairs to get water. He heard Claire in the living room speaking softly on her phone. Her tone was polite, but there was no warmth in it, and the language was not one he recognized. It was not like any foreign language he had heard in school. It was a sequence of sounds and patterns that seemed structured yet unfamiliar. Before he could listen longer, she ended the call quickly and greeted him with a friendly question about his schoolwork, as if nothing had happened. That moment stayed with him, and by afternoon his mind was too curious to ignore. He decided to run one more test with his device. The readings were normal in most rooms of the house, but when he passed by the coat rack where Claire had hung her bag, the screen lit up with a steady pulsing pattern. The numbers on the display shifted rapidly in a way he had never recorded before. He moved the device closer, and the pattern became stronger. He waited until Claire stepped out into the garden to water the plants. Then he quietly opened her bag. The usual items were there: a wallet, a small notebook, a set of keys. But tucked inside a side pocket was something he had never seen before. It was smooth and silver, about the size of a deck of cards, with no visible buttons or seams. On its surface were tiny lines that glowed faintly for a moment when his fingers brushed it. The glow faded almost instantly. Liam quickly took out his phone and snapped a picture before placing it back exactly as he found it. He did not know what it was, but it was not like any device sold in stores. He spent the next hour searching online for anything similar, but every search came up empty. The closest match was experimental equipment used in advanced research labs, but even those were bulkier and had visible controls. As the evening came, his father returned from work, and Claire prepared dinner. She moved around the kitchen with ease, chopping vegetables and humming softly. Liam kept glancing toward her, wondering if she knew he had touched her things. There was no sign she suspected anything, but he felt certain she would notice if even the smallest detail was out of place. After dinner, Liam retreated to his room again. This time he decided to check something else. He opened the picture he had taken and zoomed in on the strange lines on the silver object. The patterns were symmetrical and repeating, but not like ordinary decoration. They reminded him of diagrams from his father's work, showing energy circuits and frequency maps. Only these patterns were far more complex. His thoughts turned to the folder he had found weeks earlier on her phone, the one with photos of his father's workplace. The images were too sharp to be casual. They showed specific equipment labeled with codes only employees would know. Some pictures even looked like they were taken through a narrow lens from a hidden angle. It was not something a person would take if they were simply visiting for fun late that night when the house was quiet. Liam decided to run one more test. He carried his device down the hallway, slowly passing by the rooms. When he reached the guest room where Claire had been staying, the display flickered to life, showing the strongest signal he had recorded yet. The numbers climbed higher as he stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of something metallic, and the faint hum of energy filled the silence. On the desk beside the bed was a small box with a sliding lid. He opened it and found several sheets of thin material that looked like paper but felt smooth like plastic. Each sheet was covered in markings similar to the ones on the silver object. No letters, no numbers, just symbols arranged in precise lines. He carefully returned everything to its place and stepped out, his mind racing with possibilities. He barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Claire's calm smile and the silver object's faint glow. He knew he could not ignore these signs anymore. The pieces were forming a picture, and the picture did not belong to anything ordinary. She was hiding something big enough to keep her background vague and her habits carefully measured. The next morning, as the sun rose, Liam stood by his window looking out at the quiet street. The world seemed the same, yet he knew it was not. He had proof now. The device, the photos, the strange language, the signals from her belongings. It all pointed to a truth he had never imagined before. The idea was too large to say out loud without sounding impossible, but deep down he knew. The wedding hour drew near. Liam dressed in the suit his father had laid out for him. He kept the small sensor in his pocket, its display off for now, but ready to show its readings if needed. He walked downstairs to find the house buzzing with activity. Guests had begun to arrive, and his father was already at the church with the best man. Claire stood in the hallway, adjusting her dress in a tall mirror. Her reflection caught his eyes for a moment, and in that instant, her expression shifted from her usual warm smile to something unreadable. They left for the church in separate cars, Liam riding with his aunt, while Claire went with a group of friends. The ride felt slow and heavy in his mind. The closer they came to the church, the more his thoughts pressed on him. Every detail he had collected, every moment he had questioned it all, led to one choice. If he stayed silent, the wedding would go on, and his father might never know. If he spoke now, he might change everything by the time the church came into view. Liam had already decided he would not let this day pass without revealing the truth. The church was filled with soft golden light from the stained glass windows. The quiet hum of conversation faded as the officiant raised his voice to begin the vows. Mark stood tall at the altar beside Claire. His smile calm and certain, Claire held. her bouquet with both hands, her face serene and graceful as ever. Liam sat in the front pew, his knees tense and his fingers wrapped tightly around the small sensor in his pocket. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on him. The room seemed still, yet his heartbeat sounded loud in his ears. He could see the faint patterns of light on the floor shifting slowly as clouds passed over the sun. But his focus never left Claire. Her every movement, every glance was locked in his mind like pieces of a puzzle he had spent months trying to solve. The ceremony moved forward. The officiant spoke about love, trust, and the joining of two lives. The guests watched with warm smiles, some wiping away tears. The air in the room felt full of celebration and hope. But for Liam, it was filled with a growing tension. He remembered the silver device in her bag, the strange signals, the photographs of his father's workplace. The clues had piled up and now stood in his thoughts like a tower ready to fall. Claire's voice was smooth and steady as she spoke her vows. Each sentence sounded perfect, but too perfect to be natural. Her tone was practiced, her eyes focused on Mark, but occasionally flicking to the sides of the room as if checking the space. She spoke about loyalty and partnership, yet something about her expression felt more like performance than promise. Mark then began his vows. His voice was warm, filled with sincerity and memories of the time they had shared. He spoke from the heart, not from a script. Liam's stomach twisted because he knew his father meant every word, and yet those words were being offered to someone who was not truly who she claimed to be. The officiant's voice came again, clear and formal. If anyone here has a reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever remain silent. A ripple of quiet moved through the guests. Some shifted in their seats, some smiled at the tradition thinking no one would say a word. The pause seemed longer than it needed to be. Liam felt his pulse race. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the only chance to speak, before it was too late. His hand tightened around the sensor. His voice caught in his throat for a second. But then he stood. The movement drew every eye in the room to him. His father looked at him in surprise. The guests looked puzzled. Claire's smile did not falter, but her eyes locked on him with a calm that felt almost unnatural. "I have something to say." Liam's voice was steady but loud enough to carry across the church. He stepped out from the pew and turned to face the guests and the officiant. His father opened his mouth to speak, but Liam continued before he could. "This wedding cannot happen because Claire is not who she says she is." A wave of murmurs filled the room. The officiant looked uncertain. Mark frowned deeply and took a step toward his son. Claire remained perfectly still, watching Liam without blinking. Liam pulled the small device from his pocket and held it up. "This is my science project. It measures unusual signals. I have tested it in every part of our house. It only shows these readings near Claire's belongings, and they are not like any normal phone or computer signal." He turned the device on, and the screen lit up instantly with rapid moving numbers. "It is showing the same reading right now." Some guests leaned forward to see. The display was small, but the flickering patterns were obvious to anyone looking. Liam continued. "I have also seen photos on her phone, photos of restricted areas in Dad's workplace, places she should not have been able to visit. These were hidden in a folder deep in her files, and I have seen her use a silver object that I have never found in any store or online. It glows and has markings that are not any language I know." Gasps rose from the pews. Mark's face grew pale. He looked at Claire, then back at Liam. "Liam, are you sure about this?" His voice was quiet, but serious. "Yes," Liam replied firmly. "I have been watching her for months. She changes her phones often. She stays up late, scanning the streets through the window. She speaks in a language I have never heard, and every time my device is near her, it shows these strange signals. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the organ's idle pipes. Claire still did not move, but her smile had softened into something unreadable. Her eyes were calm, but there was a glint in them that Liam could not name. Mark took another step back from her. His expression had shifted from confusion to concern. The officiant lowered his book, uncertain what to do next. The guests whispered in low, urgent tones. Claire finally spoke. Her voice was just, as steady as before. "Liam, you have a vivid imagination," she said gently. "You have been under a lot of stress with school and this big change in your life. It is natural to feel protective of your father, but what you are suggesting is impossible." Liam did not look away. "It is not impossible, I have proof." He pointed to the device still flickering in his hand. For the first time, Claire's gaze dropped to the device. Her head tilted slightly in that strange way Liam had seen before. The movement was small, but it felt deliberate. Mark noticed it too. His breath caught, and his hands tightened at his sides. The guests were now on edge. Their earlier smiles were gone, replaced with uncertain glances toward the bride. Some seemed unsure whether this was a misunderstanding or something far more serious. Mark's voice broke the silence. "Claire, what is this about?" Claire looked at him for a long moment and then back at Liam. Her smile returned, though it seemed more controlled now. "Mark, I can explain," she began. But Liam noticed her fingers shift slightly on the bouquet as if feeling for something hidden among the flowers. The tension in the room had grown thick. Every second felt longer than the last. Liam's heart was pounding, but his focus was sharp. He knew whatever happened next would decide everything. The air inside the church felt heavy now. Every guest seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Mark stood between his son and his bride, his eyes moving back and forth as if trying to make sense of two different worlds, colliding. The officiant had stepped back, slightly unsure whether to continue or stop the ceremony entirely. Claire's fingers remained on her bouquet, her smile fixed in place. But Liam could see the change in her eyes. They no longer carried the warm sparkle she often showed. Instead, they had a sharper glint, like a glass surface catching a sudden light. Her gaze moved slowly across the room, scanning each face and then returning to Liam. "You have misunderstood everything, Liam," Claire said softly. Her voice carried no anger, but it also lacked the gentle warmth she had used before. "The photos you saw were part of a private project I was working on. The signals you found could be from any number of harmless devices. And as for the language you heard me speak, that was just a code I use for work." Mark looked at her with a frown. "A code for work," he repeated slowly. His voice carried doubt. "Now, yes," she replied calmly. "I work with international partners sometimes, and we use certain coded patterns to protect sensitive information." Liam shook his head. "That is not true. This code was not like any language. It was not human language at all." His words were clear and confident. His hand still held the small device which continued to flicker with unusual readings. A faint hum seemed to fill the silence. It was so soft that Liam wondered if he was imagining it. But then he noticed something else. Claire's pupils narrowed slightly, not like a person adjusting to light, but in a way that looked unnatural and controlled. It lasted only a second, but it was enough for him to know this was no trick of the eyes. Some of the guests noticed too. A quiet murmur spread through the rows. People glanced at each other, unsure whether they had seen the same thing Liam had. Claire must have realized it because she lowered her gaze and adjusted her bouquet. Again, Mark took a step back from her. Now his hands were tense and his voice was cautious. "Claire, I think you need to tell me the truth. Whatever it is, you need to say it now." For the first time since Liam had stood up, Claire hesitated. Her shoulders shifted slightly as if she were weighing her next words. Then she looked at Mark with a softer expression. "I do care for you, Mark," she said. "That much is true, but there are things about me you are not ready to understand yet." "What kind of things?" Mark asked. His voice was sharper now. Claire's eyes moved to Liam and then to the guests. "Things that are not meant for everyone in this room," she replied. Her tone was still calm, but it carried a finality that sent a chill through the air. The hum in the background grew a little stronger. Liam's device beeped once without him. Touching it, he looked down at the display and saw the numbers climbing higher than before. Claire glanced at it quickly, then back at him. Her expression had changed again, and for a moment Liam thought he saw a trace of respect in her eyes, as if she were acknowledging that he had discovered something important. The guests were whispering louder now. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few even rose slightly, as if unsure whether to leave. Mark turned fully toward Claire. "If there is something dangerous here, you need to say it." Claire's lips curved into a small, measured smile. "Danger is a matter of perspective," she said. "To some I am a friend, to others I am a threat. It depends on what they know and what they believe." That was when Liam saw it again. The subtle tilt of her head to the left, a movement that seemed almost mechanical. And in that instant, the sunlight through the stained glass caught her face just right, revealing the faintest shimmer along the side of her neck. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, but Liam was sure it had been there. "Dad." Liam said firmly, "This is what I have been trying to tell you. She is not who she says she is, and she is here for more than just you." Mark stared at his son, and then at Claire. His breathing was heavier now, and his jaw was set. "Claire, you need to explain right now, or I will have to end this." Claire looked at him for a long, quiet moment. The hum seemed to fade slightly. Her smile returned, but it no longer felt like an act meant for the guests. It felt like it was for Mark alone. "If I tell you everything, Mark, it will change how you see the world," she said. The guests had fallen silent again, listening closely. Every person in the room could feel that something extraordinary was about to be revealed. Liam kept his eyes locked on her, knowing that if she tried to lie again, he would be ready to call her out in front of everyone. Mark shook his head slowly. "I think I am already starting to see it." Claire's eyes softened. "Then perhaps you are," she said in a voice so low only those near the altar could hear. But instead of explaining further, she simply stood a little straighter. The bouquet in her hands lowered slightly. Her posture shifted into something more deliberate, almost like a soldier standing at attention. The small change made Liam's skin prickle. He knew that whatever mask she had worn until now was slipping, and what stood behind it was something entirely different. The church felt colder now, as if the sunlight through the stained glass had dimmed. The guests shifted in their seats, unsure of whether to watch or to move away. Mark stood motionless between Liam and Claire. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a mix of shock and something heavier, a realization he had been avoiding for too long. Liam kept his gaze steady on Claire. His small device in his hand was beeping softly now, each sound marking another strange surge of energy in the air. The patterns on the display were moving faster than they ever had before. He knew this was not a coincidence. Claire was doing something, even if it was not visible to everyone else. Mark finally spoke. His voice was low but firm. "Claire, I cannot marry you without knowing the truth. And right now it looks like everything Liam has been saying is right." Claire's expression did not break. She looked at him with calm eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed. "Mark," I have never wished to harm you, she said quietly. But you are correct, there are things I have not told you. They are not things you are ready to hear in this place. The murmurs from the guests grew louder. Some whispered about calling the police. Others simply stared frozen, in the moment. The officiant cleared his throat but said nothing, unsure of what role he should play in something so strange. Mark's hand slowly moved toward the inside pocket of his jacket. His phone was there and he knew what he needed to do. He glanced at Liam, who gave him a small nod, as if to say this was the right choice. Mark pulled the phone out and tapped the screen. His fingers moved quickly, dialing 3 numbers, 911. The line clicked, and a calm operator's voice answered, "Emergency services." "What is your location and the nature of your emergency?" Mark's voice was steady but carried urgency. "This is Mark Ellison. I am at St. Peter's Church on Oak Street. I need a special response team. I repeat, a special response team." Thus, operator's tone changed immediately. "Understood. Please confirm you are requesting the SRT." "Yes." Mark replied, "This is regarding an individual with unknown technology and potential security ties to classified research." There was a pause on the line, then the operator spoke again. "Stay where you are. We have units on the way. Keep all individuals inside if possible." Mark ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He looked at Claire, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. She did not seem frightened or surprised. If anything, she looked almost expectant. "You contacted them faster than I thought you would," she said softly. Her voice carried no anger, only a strange kind of respect. "That tells me your son is more resourceful than I imagined." Liam tightened his grip on the device in his hand. The readings spiked again. "Dad! She is increasing the signal," he said quickly. Mark turned slightly to shield Liam with his body. "What does that mean?" "It means she might be trying to send a message," Liam replied. "Maybe to someone who is not here." The words made some of the guests gasp. Several began to rise from their seats. Others moved quietly toward the side aisles, unsure of what was safe. The officiant stepped back farther from the couple, his hands gripping the edge of his book tightly. Claire glanced at the side doors of the church, then back at Liam. "You are clever," she said. "Most would not have noticed. So much in so little time? I noticed because I had to," Liam replied. "You were never here for him. You were here for something else." Mark's jaw tightened. "Is that true, Claire? What were you here for?" Claire's smile returned, but it was faint. "For knowledge, Mark. For understanding of a kind that your people are only beginning to touch. I came close to finding it, but now it seems I will not have the chance to finish." The sound of distant sirens began to grow louder. The guests heard it and exchanged looks. The tension in the air was almost solid now. Claire heard it too, and her eyes shifted slightly toward the windows. She knew time was running out. Mark took a step forward, keeping himself between her and Liam. "You are not leaving," he said. Claire tilted her head slightly. "That may not be up to you," she replied. Her tone was not threatening, but there was a weight in her words that made Liam's skin prickle. The sirens were closer now, joined by the low hum. Of engines, Liam thought he could hear more than just police vehicles. It was a heavier sound, deeper and more controlled, the kind of sound made by engines built for something specialized. Claire took one slow step back. Her movements were graceful and precise, as if measured to the exact second. "They will not understand me, Mark," she said. "And once they take me away, you will not either." "You should have told me the truth from the start," Mark said. His voice was steady, but there was pain in it. "You might have found a way to stay if you had." Claire looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Her eyes softened in a way that almost looked human again. Then she turned her gaze back to Liam. "Remember this, Liam. Not everything, Unknown is an enemy, and not everything familiar is a friend. Before Liam could answer, the heavy sound outside stopped. Doors slammed. Boots hit the pavement in a quick pattern. The main doors of the church swung open, and a team of men and women in dark uniforms entered, moving with precision. Their faces were calm but alert, and each one carried equipment that did not look like ordinary police gear. The leader stepped forward and spoke firmly. "Mark Ellison, we will take it from here." His eyes moved briefly to Claire. "Ma'am, you will come with us." Claire did not resist. She placed her bouquet gently on the altar and clasped her hands in front of her. "Very well," she said softly, as they began to lead her toward the doors. She glanced over her shoulder at Liam one last time. The look was not angry, it was thoughtful, almost like she was leaving him with an unspoken message. Then she turned away and walked with the team into the sunlight outside. The doors closed behind them. The sound of the vehicles starting up filled the air, then slowly faded into the distance. The church was left in silence, broken only by the slow breathing of the people inside. Mark turned to Liam, placing a hand on his shoulder. His voice was quiet but certain. "You did the right thing." Liam nodded, but his eyes stayed on the door where Claire had disappeared. He had stopped the wedding, but he knew this was not the end of her story, or his. The church felt colder now, as if the sunlight through the stained glass had dimmed. The guests shifted in their seats, unsure of whether to watch or to move away. Mark stood motionless between Liam and Claire. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a mix of shock and something heavier, a realization he had been avoiding for too long. Liam kept his gaze steady on Claire. His small device in his hand was beeping softly now, each sound marking another strange surge of energy in the air. The patterns on the display were moving faster than they ever had before. He knew this was not a coincidence. Claire was doing something, even if it was not visible to everyone else. Mark finally spoke. His voice was low but firm. "Claire, I cannot marry you without knowing the truth. And right now it looks like everything Liam has been saying is right." Claire's expression did not break. She looked at him with calm eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed. "Mark, I have never wished to harm you," she said quietly. "But you are correct. There are things I have not told you. They are not things you are ready to hear in this place." The murmurs from the guests grew louder. Some whispered about calling the police. Others simply stared frozen, in the moment. The officiant cleared his throat but said nothing, unsure of what role he should play in something so strange. Mark's hand slowly moved toward the inside pocket of his jacket. His phone was there and he knew what he needed to do. He glanced at Liam, who gave him a small nod, as if to say this was the right choice. Mark pulled the phone out and tapped the screen. His fingers moved quickly, dialing 3 numbers, 911. The line clicked, and a calm operator's voice answered, "Emergency services." "What is your location and the nature of your emergency?" Mark's voice was steady but carried urgency. "This is Mark Ellison. I am at St. Peter's Church on Oak Street. I need a special response team. I repeat, a special response team." Thus, operator's tone changed immediately. "Understood. Please confirm you are requesting the SRT." "Yes." Mark replied, "This is regarding an individual with unknown technology and potential security ties to classified research." There was a pause on the line, then the operator spoke again. "Stay where you are. We have units on the way. Keep all individuals inside if possible." Mark ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He looked at Claire, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. She did not seem frightened or surprised. If anything, she looked almost expectant. "You contacted them faster than I thought you would," she said softly. Her voice carried no anger, only a strange kind of respect. "That Tells me your son is more resourceful than I imagined. Liam tightened his grip on the device in his hand. The readings spiked again. Dad! She is increasing the signal, he said quickly. Mark turned slightly to shield Liam with his body. What does that mean? It means she might be trying to send a message, Liam replied. Maybe to someone who is not here. The words made some of the guests gasp. Several began to rise from their seats. Others moved quietly toward the side aisles, unsure of what was safe. The officiant stepped back farther from the couple, his hands gripping the edge of his book tightly. Claire glanced at the side doors of the church, then back at Liam. You are clever, she said. Most would not have noticed. So much in so little time? I noticed because I had to, Liam replied. You were never here for him. You were here for something else. Mark's jaw tightened. Is that true, Claire? What were you here for? Claire's smile returned, but it was faint. For knowledge, Mark. For understanding of a kind that your people are only beginning to touch. I came close to finding it, but now it seems I will not have the chance to finish. The sound of distant sirens began to grow louder. The guests heard it and exchanged looks. The tension in the air was almost solid now. Claire heard it too, and her eyes shifted slightly toward the windows. She knew time was running out. Mark took a step forward, keeping himself between her and Liam. You are not leaving, he said. Claire tilted her head slightly. That may not be up to you, she replied. Her tone was not threatening, but there was a weight in her words that made Liam's skin prickle. The sirens were closer now, joined by the low hum. Of engines, Liam thought he could hear more than just police vehicles. It was a heavier sound, deeper and more controlled, the kind of sound made by engines built for something specialized. Claire took one slow step back. Her movements were graceful and precise, as if measured to the exact second. They will not understand me, Mark, she said, and once they take me away, you will not either. You should have told me the truth from the start, Mark said. His voice was steady, but there was pain in it. You might have found a way to stay if you had. Claire looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Her eyes softened in a way that almost looked human again. Then she turned her gaze back to Liam. Remember this, Liam. Not everything. Unknown is an enemy, and not everything familiar is a friend. Before Liam could answer, the heavy sound outside stopped. Doors slammed. Boots hit the pavement in a quick pattern. The main doors of the church swung open, and a team of men and women in dark uniforms entered, moving with precision. Their faces were calm but alert, and each one carried equipment that did not look like ordinary police gear. The leader stepped forward and spoke firmly. Mark Ellison, we will take it from here. His eyes moved briefly to Claire. Ma'am, you will come with us. Claire did not resist. She placed her bouquet gently on the altar and clasped her hands in front of her. Very well, she said softly, as they began to lead her toward the doors. She glanced over her shoulder at Liam one last time. The look was not angry. It was thoughtful, almost like she was leaving him with an unspoken message. Then she turned away and walked with the team into the sunlight outside. The doors closed behind them. The sound of the vehicles starting up filled the air, then slowly faded into the distance. The church was left in silence, broken only by the slow breathing of the people inside. Mark turned to Liam, placing a hand on his shoulder. His voice was quiet but certain. You did the right thing. Liam nodded, but his eyes stayed on the door where Claire had disappeared. He had stopped the wedding, but he knew this was not the end of her story, or his. The church felt empty now, even though many people were still inside. The air was heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Mark stood in the middle of the aisle looking at the door where Claire had been taken. Liam stayed close to him, his small device still in hand, though the signal on it had gone quiet. Outside, the vehicles carrying Claire were already far away, but Mark's mind was still chasing them. He had so many questions and almost no answers. The guests began to leave slowly, in small groups whispering to each other about what they had seen. Some shook their heads, not believing it. Others could not stop looking at Liam as if he was the only one who had understood. Liam broke the silence first. "Dad, they will not tell us where they are taking her," Mark nodded. "I know, but we cannot just let them disappear with her without knowing why." He looked down at Liam. "Do you still have the reading from your device?" Liam tapped the screen and brought it to life. The numbers were steady now, but there was still a faint pattern in the background. "It is weak, but I think I can track it," he said. "She is not gone yet." Mark placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we will follow." They walked out of the church into the bright afternoon sun. The street was quiet now. Only the faint sound of traffic in the distance. Mark led Liam to his car, a dark blue sedan that had been parked a few blocks away. As they got inside, Liam placed the device on the dashboard, securing it so it could track without moving. Mark started the engine and drove slowly, at first, letting Liam focus on the signal. The boy's eyes moved between the screen and the streets outside. "They are heading toward the outskirts of the city," Liam said after a moment. "If we keep going straight, we might catch up before they reach wherever they are going." The buildings around them grew fewer as they drove. The road stretched long and open ahead with patches of trees on both sides. The signal began to strengthen again. Liam adjusted the settings, narrowing the range. "They are slowing down," he said. Mark tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "That means they have reached something." Soon they saw it in the distance. A large fenced compound stood beyond a row of tall trees. The fence was high-topped with angled metal and warning signs. The vehicles they had been following were parked near a wide gate, which was guarded by two uniformed figures. Mark pulled the car to the side of the road, stopping behind a line of bushes. "We cannot get too close," he said quietly, "but we can watch." From where they were, they could see Claire being led out of the main vehicle. She walked calmly, as before her posture, straight, and her eyes scanning the area. She was taken through the gate and into one of the larger buildings inside the compound. Liam's device gave a soft pulse. "The signal is stronger now. It is coming from inside that building," Mark studied the scene. "This is not a regular police station," he said. "This is something else, something hidden from most people." They waited until the gates closed and the guards returned to their posts. Mark looked at Liam. "If we want answers, we cannot get them from out here." Liam understood what his father meant. "You are thinking about going in," Mark nodded. "Not now, not in daylight, but tonight when it is quiet." They drove back to a small diner a few miles away and parked in the corner of the lot. Mark ordered 2 cups of coffee for himself and a sandwich for Liam. They sat at a booth near the window, talking in low voices. When they took her, she did not fight. Liam said, "It almost felt like she wanted to be there." Mark took a slow sip of his coffee. "Or she knew something was waiting for her inside." Liam looked down at his device again. "If she is sending a message, maybe it is not to call for help. Maybe it is to call for someone else to come." The thought made Mark pause. If that was true, then the compound was not just holding her. It might be preparing for something much larger. When night finally came, they drove back toward the compound, but parked even farther away this time. The air was cool and still. The moon gave just enough light to see the outline of the fence. Mark and Liam moved quietly through the trees, staying in the shadows. They found a section of the fence where the trees grew close enough to hide them from the guard towers. Mark crouched low and examined the ground. A small drainage tunnel ran underneath, though it was narrow and partly covered with metal bars. Liam knelt beside him. "Can we get through?" Mark checked the bars. They were old and slightly rusted. With a bit of effort, he loosened one enough to slide it aside. The tunnel was damp and smelled faintly of earth, but it was just wide enough for them to crawl through. On the other side, they emerged into a strip of grass just inside the fence. The compound was quiet. though they could hear faint voices from one of the buildings. They moved closer, staying low until they reached the back of the large building where they had seen Claire taken earlier. A single window was lit on the second floor Mark spotted. A metal ladder bolted to the wall leading up to the roof. He pointed to it, and Liam nodded. They climbed slowly, avoiding any sudden noise. Once on the roof, they found a narrow skylight. It was locked, but Mark used a small tool from his pocket to lift it enough to see inside. Below them was a wide room filled with strange equipment. Some of it looked like advanced computers, while other parts were covered with metallic panels and glowing screens. Claire was sitting at a table in the middle. Surrounded by 3 people in the same dark uniforms, they were speaking to her, though she did not seem afraid. She was pointing at one of the screens as if explaining something. Liam whispered, "She is not a prisoner. She is working with them," Mark's eyes narrowed. "Or she is pretending to so she can get what she wants." They could not hear the words, but they could see the way Claire's hands moved. She traced shapes in the air, almost like she was drawing something invisible. One of the uniformed figures nodded and began typing into the console. Mark pulled back from the skylight. "We cannot stay long. If they see us, we lose everything." They climbed down the ladder and moved back toward the fence, using the same tunnel to escape. Once they were safely outside, Mark turned to Liam. "Now we know this is bigger than just her being here. She is part of something they are building." Liam's device gave another faint pulse. "And whatever it is almost ready." They stood in the dark trees, looking at the silent compound ahead. Somewhere inside, Claire was preparing for something that neither of them yet understood, but they both knew one thing. This was far from over.